Hello, and welcome back to the Study Legal English podcast. The purpose of this particular podcast episode is to welcome back my regular listeners and to welcome new listeners to the podcast and to wish you all a happy new year. In this podcast episode, I wanted to talk about what the podcast is. Okay, so, if you are a regular listener, then you probably know what the podcast is because you've been listening to it. And as well, to talk a little bit about me and my background, because again, if you're a regular listener, you probably know a little bit about me, but we can get to know each other a little bit better. You can, of course, introduce yourself to me through an email. My email address is louise@studylegalenglish.com, or you can send me a message on social media. You can find me by searching on Instagram for @legalenglisher, or join my Facebook group. My Facebook group, if you search for Study Legal English group on Facebook, we've got a growing community of lawyers and law students and legal professionals. So come on over and introduce yourself. I was inspired to make this podcast episode because I've been listening a little bit to another podcast called Luke's English Podcast, and it's a general English podcast, and it's really, really helpful to listen to for you if you're a language learner, because he has really long episodes. He also interviews people and talks a little bit about the English language and vocabulary and things. And at the beginning of this year, the beginning of 2021, he did this welcome back episode for his listeners, and he went through this kind of Q&A style session with himself about his podcast and about him. So I thought, yeah, that's quite a nice thing to do. So thank you, Luke. So the first question is, what is this podcast? So the podcast is called the Study Legal English Podcast. Hopefully that's clear to you what this podcast is about. It's to study legal English. So what is legal English? Legal English is the language of the law in English. So it's not, if there are any Portuguese speakers who listen to the show, which I know there are, Brazilian or Portuguese listeners, legal in Portuguese means cool, okay? It's not to study cool English, sadly, no. It is to study the language of the law. So if you're listening to this thinking, hey, I'm studying some really cool English, that's not the purpose, I'm afraid. You need to head over and listen to a different podcast. This podcast is about studying the law. We generally focus on the English legal system and as well international law. Okay, we do stuff on contracts and commercial law with an international feeling to it. And as well, we focus on the language of the law. Lawyers and people who work in the legal profession, knowing the English language if you work in an international environment is very important, but it's not general English. You can't get by in that environment just with a good knowledge of English. You need to know the very niche topic, the very niche area of legal English. And legal English is the language of the law. It has its own collocations. For example, to breach a contract, we don't say to break a contract. It has certain sentence structures that are used and which you should be able to understand, and to understand when you should use them and when you should not use them, when you should be using the active and passive voice, for example. And yeah, just loads of vocabulary, which certain words in legal English mean very specific things, whereas in general English they mean something different. Consideration is one example. Consideration in legal English is a concept which is a contract law concept, which is like this kind of exchange, this element of exchange. So I give you something in return for something else, basically. And in general English, consideration is like something thoughtful. So legal English is this category of English which lawyers and legal professionals, law students, anyone who's working with the law and who deals with people who speak English need to know this language of the law. So this podcast aims to help you improve your legal English. And how do I do that? Well, generally I talk about topics of law. I interview people as well, not always native speakers, but sometimes non-native speakers as well, people who are working in the law, lawyers, translators, interpreters, experts in contract drafting, people who can really help you to improve your spoken and written legal English. So my next question is, who is it for? Is it for me? It's for lawyers, it's for law students, it's for translators who work with legal English, for interpreters, for paralegals, for judges. It's for people who work with the law in some capacity and who require either in spoken form or in written form English. So an example, okay, if you're a lawyer who works with international clients, generally, you're going to be writing your contracts in English. So, of course, you're going to need to know how to do that. And so listening to this podcast can hopefully help you improve in that area. So that's the kind of person who this podcast is for. This is a podcast about language learning. I'm not necessarily producing these podcasts for native speakers, although there are native speakers who do listen to the podcast. So the focus is on language learning. So if English is not your native language, then yes, this podcast is for you. Native speakers do listen to the podcast. Okay, I've got people who are studying law who listen to some of the episodes on things like civil procedure, criminal procedure, to help them with their studies. As well, language teachers, legal English teachers do listen to the show, to, especially the interviews, because the interviews are very, hopefully they're interesting, whether you're a native or a non-native speaker. So the podcast is generally for legal professionals or students of the law whose native language is not English, but they require English in some capacity. The other thing is about your level. If you're listening to this podcast and you're finding it really difficult, okay, then I suggest that you listen to some of my earlier podcast episodes, because those I really, because I was just starting out, I did them at a very slow pace. So it's probably easier for you to understand those ones than the ones that I'm producing now are a little bit more of, I'm speaking at a more natural pace. I speak with, when I conduct interviews, I'm speaking at a more natural pace. If you're a beginner and you're just starting out, it might be difficult for you. I suggest that you can still listen to it, but it might be quite difficult. So generally this podcast is for more intermediate and advanced learners. So the next question is, will it help me learn legal English? I certainly hope so. So yes, that is the aim of the podcast. It's to help you learn legal English. And how does it do that? Well, by listening to podcasts, you're consuming information, you're getting comfortable with the language of the law. So that just by itself is going to help you improve. You're also going to learn, get knowledge about the law, about the certain legal systems, about contract drafting techniques, things like that. It is a help on its own, but it's not the only thing. If you're serious about learning, then you should be doing other things, okay? You should be listening to general English podcasts as well. You should be reading articles, reading books. You should be speaking, okay? Get yourself an English teacher, get yourself a legal English teacher, or go on a course where you can speak, where you can practice, and where you can improve. So, listening to the podcast, reading documents, speaking in classes and things like that. And of course, writing. Writing is super important to improve your language. Now, I do have something called Podcast Pro and Podcast Lite membership on my site. So these are paid for memberships where you can get extra resources which will help you improve. So for example, for all of most of the podcasts, I think, that I've produced, there are these extra materials, for example, transcripts, so you can read the transcript and understand fully what I am saying if you struggle already. So you can listen and as well follow along with the transcript. There are quizzes to test your knowledge. There are different activities basically to help you improve. So if that's something you're interested in, then you can go to studylegalenglish.com and you can find, if you go to /pricing, you can find the membership levels there. And because it's the new year and I want you to succeed this year, and I'm feeling generous because it is this time of giving. There's this I'm running a promotion where you can get 50% off memberships. Enter the coupon New Year 2021. You'll get 50% off the memberships, and that's just running in January. Okay, so February, you're too late. So I hope that's given you a good idea about what the podcast is, who it's for, how it can help you. Anyway, let's move on. So who are you? So my name is Louise Kolbitsky. That's who I am. And yeah, sometimes people say, how do you pronounce your name? Where's your name from? Where are you from? So my surname is Polish, yes, but I'm not Polish. I am British. Why do I have a Polish surname? Well, my granddad, my dad's dad, was Polish. So that's my name. Where am I from? So I grew up in a place called Monmouthshire, which is actually in Wales. However, it's right on the border of England and Wales. And historically, it's sometimes been in Wales, and sometimes it's been in England. Yes, so that's where I grew up and that's where I'm from. And so my accent, I don't have a Welsh accent. The Welsh accent is like, hello, all right, bud, something like that, how you doing? I can't really do it very well, but anyway, I don't have a Welsh accent. I would say my accent is quite neutral, quite in line with received pronunciation. And so, why is that? It's because both of my parents are English, so I didn't pick up a Welsh accent. And because Monmouthshire is a very English part of Wales, we can say it's not a place where Welsh is really spoken, although I did learn Welsh at school. So next question, what is your background? How did I end up teaching this crazy little thing called legal English? So I studied law at university, and I also did volunteer work with some environmental law organisations. I did some volunteer work in the law department of Friends of the Earth, which is an environmental charity. I did some vacation schemes at law firms, for example, Bates, Wells and Braithwaite's, which is a a leading law firm in the area of charities. Anyway, once I finished my degree, I did a master's in international environmental law at UCL, University College London. And when I finished, I got a job with a barrister called Polly Higgins, who was working to promote changes in international law. I did a lot of speaking about our work. I went to universities around Europe. I went to different conferences and festivals to speak about these proposed changes that we were trying to raise awareness of. I went to Rome, to the International United Nations International Crime and Research Institute, I think it's called, to present our work. And I also went to Rio de Janeiro, where I presented our work at this youth conference, and as well I got to attend the World Congress on Law, which was attended by chief justices from around the world. It was amazing, looking at implementing and improving environmental law. Now, when I was in Brazil, I fell in love with Brazil, and I decided to move there. Anyway, I moved there. I didn't speak Portuguese. My plan A would have been to continue working in the environmental law field. However, not speaking the language of the country was kind of a barrier to doing that. So before I went, I did do a TEFL course as kind of my plan B. And when I was out there, I started teaching English. And that's where my journey into teaching legal English began. After a certain amount of time in Brazil, I moved back to London and I continued to teach legal English. I taught privately online to private students. And so I started this podcast as a way to help people have access to resources about legal English. And for me, I love podcasts. I love watching videos on YouTube. I think it's a great way to learn languages. So I thought, hey, why not do that for legal English? So what else? I do teach courses. Okay, I've taught courses in contract drafting. Last year, I started teaching a course in Oman with EMG Associates and International Training World. And yeah, I was teaching TOLS, so the test of legal English skills, to wonderful students out there. And for those of you who don't know what TOLS is, it's a test it's like an exam to give you, to test your level of legal English. And it's based on the English legal system. And there are different levels of it. There's like foundation, higher and advanced. And yeah, it's quite a helpful test to do. But in order to prepare for the test, you learn a lot of legal English. So you can prepare, you can work through a book and then take the test at the end of it. So I was teaching that. Currently, I'm teaching a course on practical legal English skills. So things like negotiation, networking, legal writing, client interviews, things like that. And I'm teaching that in Oman as well. And I'm also writing a book. So Natasha Costello, who I interviewed last year, or maybe the year before now, 2019, on contract drafting. She's an English teacher and a non-practicing qualified solicitor in England and Wales. She lives and works in Paris, and we're writing a book on practical legal English skills. The aim is for it to be a course book to be used for courses in practical legal English skills, and for it to be practical, for it to be, hopefully fun, because, we both try to make legal English fun. It can be fun, I can assure you it can be very, very fun. Next question. Why should we listen to you? Yes, a good question. Well, I'm a native English speaker. I teach. That's what I do. So if you're looking for someone to help you with your language, then hopefully I can do it. I'm a qualified teacher. I've done my TEFL course. quite a while ago. I've done extra qualifications in legal English teaching, and I teach. I've got experience, as I've mentioned. So I've taught courses, I've taught individuals, and I try to keep myself updated through being a teacher. The final, my selling point about why you should listen to me, I speak other languages myself, which is not that, we can say it's not that common for native English speakers. I've been through the experience of learning Portuguese, and I'm currently learning Italian because I live in Italy. I forgot to mention that. So I live in a little town called Lecco on Lake Como. So, it's important that I speak Italian. I hope that my experience of learning the language, not just the fact that, I understand how difficult it is to learn grammar, and my own experience of having to learn vocabulary and things like that. I hope that informs my teaching, because I can understand what it's like for you as a learner of a different language, how difficult that can be. But it's also, I've been through that psychological process of when you are, you might be a really expert in your field, in your own language, and then you get to speaking another language and it feels like I'm an idiot. I can't express myself. I've been through that. I've been through that humiliating process. I know that it's different for everybody, and everyone has a different experience of learning a language. But I can, I feel for you. I understand what it's like. So that, I would say, is why you should listen to me. Okay, I'm a native speaker, I'm a teacher, I'm well connected. I do interviews with people who really know what they're talking about, and I speak another language, so I can get it. Next question. Are you on YouTube? I am on YouTube. You might even be watching this on YouTube. If you're not watching this on YouTube and you're listening to the podcast, head over to YouTube. So we are coming to the end of the episode. So what is my main message? Well, I totally forgot to say at the beginning of the episode that this is the 100th episode. So yes, I'm so happy. So the other final message that I want to leave you with is, if you want to improve, you should be listening regularly to the show, and you should be listening to the shows in full. You need to be consuming a lot of legal English. So my advice is to listen regularly and to listen for long periods. Even if it's not to my show. I mean, basically, go and watch Suits on Netflix. Go and watch, Better Call Saul. Go and watch other legal films, legal dramas. But do it. Don't just put it off until tomorrow. Get on and start studying and listening and things like that. Anyway, the other point is that I wanted to say, join me on social media. I'm on Instagram. You can find me at Legal Englisher. I post stuff on there. And as well, I've got a Facebook page, but I don't really post much on there. I generally tend to post in the Facebook group. So if you search Study Legal English group, you're going to find we're a nice community. Everybody introduces themselves. It's really lovely. So that's it. Thank you for listening today. Thank you so much. And I will say bye and see you next time. Bye.